Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping all of us to use the adversity and really difficult things in our life to grow and reach our highest, most fullest potential. I am joined today by Aaron Bender, my producer. Aaron,
Amber Rae is on the, let me say that one more time, just so I could cut it for the trailer that I'm going to be doing in post-production. Amber Rae is on the show today, author, speaker, teacher, and I found what I think might be the least interesting thing to talk about for this first segment, because she has a fascinating story. She has a fascinating book. Loveable is the new book, and I wanted to talk about writer's block.
You did. You did. You came into Glam this morning and you said, I have a great idea. For our first segment, let's talk about how she helps people go through writer's block. To which I responded, bro, she wrote a book about how she got married, she got engaged, knew it was wrong, went through a multiple month, a very long engagement, knew it was wrong, got married, stayed in the marriage, knew it was wrong because she wanted to be the good girl and she didn't want to hurt him. And it's like this really gripping story. I was hanging on every word. And it's so relatable, I think, to so many of us, I think so many women, and just in our everyday lives, how we're choosing, comfort and not hurting other people's feelings and all that over freedom. And you want to talk about writer's block? No, we're not doing that.
I edit the show, and we're going to talk about writer's block. So here's the...
We have Amber Rae joining us today. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and teacher. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here.
So this is your most recent book, I think, a memoir called Loveable. And I have to say, I try to read all the books. We have a lot of authors on the show. I try to read the book, but generally I'm like reading it very fast. And I got to be so honest, I didn't finish this book because I was hanging on every word. I could not do my normal speed reading, like get the whole gist of the book. And so I don't want to spoil it now, but like I don't know how the story ends. So I'm dying to hear, but don't tell me just yet, because we have to catch our watchers and our listeners up to speed before we get to where you are now in your present day. But in any case, tell us, where do we even begin? I guess tell us about the story that you wrote about in your book, Loveable.
Yeah, so it was 4 years ago while married that I looked into the eyes of a stranger and felt this feeling of hello again. And I knew that he was the person that I was supposed to spend my life with, not the person that I was married to.
Yeah.
And I had this kind of deep just knowing of he's the one, which was also accompanied by a voice in my head, the fear voice in my head that was like, are you insane?
Right.
He's a stranger and you're married, and also you've made your husband your business partner and you're building this land project, and here are 9,000 reasons why you are not going to blow up your life in marriage for this person that you just met.
Right.
But when I looked into his eyes, it was also a wake-up call, because I wasn't being honest with myself about the marriage that I was in, and I was trying desperately to make it work. And we've been together for 9 years, but the truth was he was not my romantic partner, as you would hope your husband would be. Yeah. He was my best friend. He was my business collaborator. He was my roommate. And because so much, there was aspects of our relationship that worked. We were friends. We got along. We traveled. We had a good community. I was desperately trying to convince myself that that was enough. But,
yes.
I was unmet in so many ways. It was a sexless marriage. It was just, I felt, it wasn't right. But I tried to convince myself that it was.
Yes. So you may or may not know this, but my day job is as a divorce lawyer. And so often, during like sort of the consultation process, somebody will come to us, I'm thinking about a divorce, and then they sort of catalog all the, all the ways that that they don't feel the relationship is fulfilling, and sort of the flaws of the other person as it relates to their needs. And, I always ask them, okay, when did this start? When did you start noticing these things? And so often they say before they even got married. And one of the things in your book that you wrote, did I read it right that you guys were engaged for 7 years?
7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, that alone wasn't a red flag.
Right. Okay, I'm with you. But so you write, and I don't know. Okay, yeah. So at this point, you had already been engaged for 7 years, and you write that you were thinking, and this is before you're married, but after you're engaged for 7 years, just so it's very clear for everyone. You're writing, am I happy here? Is he my person? Do I feel loved? Is it okay? Is it okay we don't have sex? Is it wrong of me to want more? Am I being ungrateful? I can be happy here, right? And then you go on to say, but I've decided once and for all, I can make this work. And you get married, right? Yeah. Yes. And then through your marriage,
not only do I get married, but I throw the
you have the most perfect wedding.
The most crazy, perfect wedding that I could possibly throw.
Yes.
To try to prove that the love was real.
Yes. Do you think that's what that was about?
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time, but
Right.
yeah, I was like, let me put on, it was this crazy performance for everyone.
Right.
Morocco, camels, everything.
Yeah. Oh my God. I know. I was like, I wish I was at that wedding. It sounds fabulous.
Everyone said it was the best wedding they'd ever been to.
Oh my gosh. But it wasn't the best wedding you've ever been to, because you write, I just walked down the aisle thinking, I don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And then you spend several years sort of trying to convince yourself in that marriage that this is working, and you were sort of looking for signs like, okay, now we're going to have this business project together. This is a sign it's going to work, right? Like you just kind of kept looking for signs.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
So looking back now, hindsight is always 2020. What do you, and I mean, I know because I read the book, but the people watching, listening didn't read the book. So looking back now, what have you learned about why it was so important to make that work, and why it was so important to put on that performance and be the good girl? Like, what have you learned about yourself through that?
Yeah, I think I was so afraid of disappointing and hurting other people. And I, this wasn't conscious, but I was so willing to disappoint myself, to abandon myself, to keep the peace, to be the harmonizer, to make sure I didn't ruffle any feathers or upset anyone, to, even though I knew before the wedding, oh, this is probably not going to last, was I going to call off the wedding, tell all of our friends and family, we just spent so much money, it's like, I just kept putting myself in situations where I almost couldn't get out of it. And it was because I was so terrified to just admit, I'm not happy here and I don't want this, because that would, hurt people that I loved. Yeah. And so I think a big lesson from me has been that disappointing others is actually a really essential skill. And, we don't have to be savages in the way that we do it. We can allow people's hurt to touch us, but we cannot disappoint. If disappointing others means we're disappointing ourselves, that doesn't work. And we have to make self-honoring choices. We have to be able to look in the mirror and say, yes, this is right. This is true. This is a reflection of who I truly am.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because I think some of that, for all of us, I think a lot of these types of patterns and sort of learned behaviors and, things, the way we act comes from the way we were raised, our childhood. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah. So, and it was also part of the idea that I wanted to make safe choices in love. So my father left when I was young, got into a car accident, had a traumatic brain injury. He was in a hospital for 9 years, but essentially I met him when I was 8 years old for the first time that I remember. And I remember feeling this intense longing and desire for him to see me and know me and be able to say, I love you.
Yeah.
I had looked around, my friends had these fathers, like, why don't I have one too? And my mom described him as this wonderful man. So for little me, it was like, who is this wonderful person that, that left us?
Yeah.
And I think because of that longing for a father's love, I decided that desire was dangerous, that
Mm.
longing for someone was too painful. And so when it came to my romantic relationships, I was not going to put myself in a situation where I would have to feel the wound of abandonment again, or the pain of not having that connection. And so the safer choice was, okay, here's my best friend. Here's someone who I believe won't leave me. That's a better bet than risking, extraordinary love that could all blow up in my face. And,
Yes.
I had a few boyfriends where I kind of was like, well, this feels, I actually feel the desire here. And it did
Oh,
blow up in my face.
right.
And so I was like, whoa, 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 that's not safe. I'm not going to do that again. I can't tolerate the pain
Mm.
of that. So I'm going to just be safe.
Right. Okay. So I do have to ask you one burning question. Well, I got a lot of burning questions, but one kind of juicy burning question. So you do talk about how it was a relatively sexless relationship,
Yeah.
and and but it wasn't for lack of. Well, I mean, you do talk about how you got to a point where you didn't really want him to touch you and, you didn't want that. But it also seemed like he wasn't interested in that aspect of the relationship, correct?
Yeah, we both kind of weren't initiating. It was very strange. Like, when
I'm
you're
like,
in it,
okay, he is still a man. Like, what is going on here?
I can't speak for him,
Yeah.
but, when I look back, I'm like, what the hell were we doing? Like, and it's,
Right.
when you're in something, you have to be so convincing to be able to stay. So it's like, I
Yeah.
didn't realize how alarming it was until I was on the other side. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And I remember one of my childhood best friends being like, you're a sexual person. What the hell?
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to ask you is, did you have were you talking to your girl did you have girlfriends that you were talking to, just like girl talk whatever, and was there ever a point where they were like, yeah, this isn't normal, like something is going on here?
I was very ashamed of it because I think I
Okay.
knew that if I admitted the truth of that part of our relationship, I would have to face the reality of our relationship, which I was not ready or prepared to do. But
Right.
I had a girlfriend recently tell me, she's like, you were kind of like, is this normal? Is this crazy? We're 9 years in though. So maybe, this
Yeah.
is just what happens after a while.
Right.
You like lose touch with that. So, I think I was justifying, and she even reflected to me. She was like, I wasn't in the best sex, we had just had a kid.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't the friend to be like, that's not normal, because here I was like
Right.
maybe having sex with my husband once a quarter.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I don't think I was telling the right friends
Got it.
because, and or I wasn't being very honest with them, because I had
Yes.
other friends tell me after that, like, I wasn't as honest about the sexlessness, again because I was trying to convince myself.
Totally. And as you're saying that, I'm recalling another episode that we did with a sex therapist, actually.
Mm.
And she was talking about how there is so much shame around that, around frequency or lack thereof, that people often do hide it. And I had
Yeah.
actually kind of forgotten about that until you mentioned that. So that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so
I
you're,
mean, we weren't even telling our therapist we weren't having sex.
yes, so I found that so interesting. So you guys were going to therapy, right?
Yeah.
And to your therapist, you were the model couple. Interesting.
So much convincing.
So, looking back, do you think that going to therapy was helpful or hurtful or neutral, because it wasn't an honest experience anyway, and so it was just kind of like it didn't make things better or worse?
I think it was neutral. I don't think it hurt. I don't think it helped us move things along, in reflection now, because I've worked with great therapists. I think the right therapist would call it out and be like, feel like something's not
Oh,
being fully said here.
yeah.
But you know, I think she did in some ways help us untangle some difficult conversations and kind
Okay.
of begin voicing things that weren't voiced. So I do think that, you know, because the way my journey unfolds is that when I meet this other person, it wasn't like, oh, now I'm going to go and hide some secret affair. I was very open about the fact that like I feel like I just met a soulmate. And so
Right.
my kind of MO was I'm gonna be honest and transparent. And so I do think that the fact that we were voicing things perhaps made that easier.
Yes. So that was one of the more fast, I mean, the book to me, like I said, I was hanging on every word. But that was also very interesting. So to kind of catch everybody up, you're in this marriage where you subconsciously you know it's not working. You know this isn't the
Yeah.
marriage that you truly want for yourself. And then you meet this person and instantly this person's name is John. Maybe, I don't know. In the book, the person's name is John, right? And you meet this person and it's just like instantly, you know, you're like, this is my person.
Yeah.
But what was so interesting is even your husband was like, I've never seen you more alive. I'm so thankful for John, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think that was about?
You know, I think it was two things. I think he was trying to be the good man who
Okay.
wanted to believe in like the idea of unconditional love and wanting my happiness and highest self. I think part of him really did believe that. And I think
Okay.
another part of him didn't know how to step up to the plate, didn't know how to compete with that, felt
Oh,
insecure,
yeah.
and thought if I'm the good husband who
Right.
allows her to feel her aliveness, maybe I'll get rewarded in the end. I can't that's me because I have wondered what is that about? Like, why was he so
Yeah.
on board?
Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. Like if
Or
my
maybe he just
husband,
wanted in
yeah.
and out. I don't know. Maybe he wanted out too, and it was the more convenient. I really like maybe it was all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think,
Hmm.
because he was in some ways he like sat John and I down at one point and was like, I have to say, since you're meeting my wife's emotional needs, it's giving me so much space to work on the things that
Right.
I want to be working
And
on.
now
And I was like,
apparently I
I'm
want to,
sorry, what?
and then he's like, I want to be famous. And now I have time to do that. What? Wow. Yes.
So
So do you think your husband at the time, he was basically performing just as much as you were?
we connected and actually talked about it post separation, and I don't think again we were intentionally trying to deceive anyone or performing, but I
Right.
think we
Yeah.
were both in the story of our relationship
Mm.
and not the reality of our relationship. And
Mm.
so, he later reflected to me that like there were a lot of stories about who we were as a couple and what this relationship was, but we weren't, being fully honest.
Right. Are you still in touch with him today?
We not, I told him the book was coming out. He wasn't thrilled.
Okay.
That's the last time that I spoke
Oh,
with
okay.
him.
Do you think he's read the book?
Who knows? I'm sure we get back.
Okay.
But he's, I don't name him. I
Yeah.
removed any reference of us on the internet. So it's like I did the, I was like,
Okay.
I hear being a character in someone's memoir is probably not the most comfortable thing, but I
Right.
tried to separate him from it as much as I could.
Okay, but this is my real burning question. Are you with John today?
Am I supposed to give that away?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we don't want to spoil it.
I can give it away because it's kind of fun. Because the story isn't really about who do I choose. It's
Right.
it's more about choosing myself. But yes, 6 weeks after meeting John, I essentially pack up my life into 2 suitcases. I close my relationship with my husband, and I fly to LA to be with John.
Oh my gosh.
And here I was on the other side of a 9-year sexless relationship,
Yeah.
feeling very disconnected from that part of myself.
Yeah.
And John was not disconnected from that part of himself. So,
Right.
leaving the marriage is one part of the story, but then I find myself in this relationship where I'm terrified and facing all of the abandoned insecurities and
Yes.
feeling disconnected. And, it was like an initiation that I was not expecting.
Wow. So, oh my gosh, I have chills. That's, I actually literally was just having a conversation with a friend at dinner the other night. And I'm like, if you don't know within a couple months if like this is your person, it's not your person. And you are further validating my point, because 6 weeks into it, you're like, I'm done with this and I am pursuing this. And
literally, he picked me up at LAX with my belongings. We committed our lives to each other and we had not yet kissed. And we're like, let's just move in together and see if it's right.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And so how long ago was that?
That was 4 years ago.
Okay.
A little more than 4 years ago.
And things are still like, as you sit here today, was that a good decision?
I mean, I have a 10-month-old soulmate baby,
yes.
So.
Oh my God, I have chills. Wow.
So yes, it was.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So for the people right now thinking, oh my gosh, like what about a rebound relationship? Those maybe aren't good. They always talk about also like people, I mean, you didn't really have an affair. I don't know. Do you consider it an affair or not?
I don't consider it an affair. Some people called it an emotional affair. Affair to me is like in secret, in hiding.
Right.
This was neither of those things.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like, it almost felt like sometimes the universe, whatever you want to call it, you have these sliding door moments where you realize I am not in the right life. Whoa, I see another, like, this is actually the right life. Am I going to jump onto it or not? And so I just like very quickly kind of created new alignment, and I kind of trusted that it would take each person to the right thing. And my ex, he remarried. He's now, so like I really think that it was in the highest good for all. So I wouldn't call it an affair. I would call it kind of like a reckoning and a reawakening.
Yes. So are there people that have said like this was a rebound relationship and be careful, anything like that?
Oh yeah, people had so many opinions and feelings. You barely know him. Like, are you crazy? You get people call me more like you're shameful. You're narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, it was people said some crazy things. But the rebound thing, I didn't get, people have so many rules around what is supposed to happen with love. And I just feel like that noise gets in the way of us listening to what's right and true for us.
Yes.
Because even when I was like, I knew like I'm supposed to go do this with John, but the noise was like, people are going to think I'm crazy. People aren't going to understand. And, I have to explain myself. And I had to keep coming back to like, no, I have this knowing within.
Right. How did you, I mean, yes, I understand you're like, I had this knowing within, but how that, it seems simple when you say it like that, but I think in real life, maybe it's not that simple. How it feels like it would be so much more complicated because, there is all the noise. Like, what are my parents going to think? What are my friends going to think? What is my social circle going to think? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this the right thing? Is this so much noise. What did you do to really cut through the noise and be able to hear the knowing within? Because sometimes people have a knowing within and they'll just shove it down all day, every day. I mean, I have people that come to me for a divorce and it's obvious they should definitely get that divorce. And then, several years go by and they'll come back and they're still thinking about it. But I'm like, but they're because they're shoving that all knowing feeling down. They're just suppressing it. So how did you cut through all that noise to know that feeling was valid and real and you should listen to it?
Yeah. And to be clear, now I'm like, oh, no, we knew. But in the moment, I was like, oh my God, people are going to judge. What am I doing? And so, it was very messy.
Yes.
And two things. One, I turned to a journal because I needed a sacred, safe place to be honest with myself. Mm-hmm. And so my first step was to admit the hard truths to myself, which I had been avoiding for a long time. And that started with me very simply, not simply. My hand was shaky and I was like crying hysterically as I did it. Like, I no longer want to be in this marriage. This hasn't been working for some time. I finally, went to the page and asked myself, what truth am I afraid to admit and why?
Right.
And I really let myself go there. And I believe that when we can be brave on the page, we can be brave in real life.
Mm.
And, perhaps for me, it was a journal. It could also be a trusted therapist or, whatever that space is for yourself to be seen and heard in the most honest vulnerability possible. That is essential. Then the
Yes.
second step for me, once I was very honest with myself, I went to a trusted friend. And this was more to help with the shame I was grappling
Okay.
about, because as Brene Brown says, shame cannot survive when spoken in a safe space. I'm paraphrasing. But essentially, like, okay, here I know what I feel personally now, but if I do this thing, people are going to judge me and shame me, and it's going to be awful. And so I went to my very close friend and I just kind of poured out, I don't want to be in my marriage anymore. I met someone else. I'm in love, but like, oh my God, what are people going to think? Da, 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 da. And I even thought when I went to her to say that, I thought she was going to be like, whoa, Amber, slow down. You should make your marriage work.
Oh.
But she was so relieved. And she
Oh.
was like, oh, because she knew I wasn't really
Right.
truly fulfilled or happy.
Yeah.
And she said to me, listen, liberation is a two-way street, and no one benefits from someone being half in on her relationship.
Mm.
So do the courageous thing and don't delay the inevitable.
Hmm.
And she was really that person that, and she said, people are going to judge you and have feelings about this, but a lot of
Yes.
that is going to be their own projections and their own fears and
Yeah.
their own stuff. But your job is to honor what's right and true for you. And so she was like, I mean, what a good friend,
Yes.
to kind of be that voice to that. Like, she was really like the last bit of courage I needed to make the self-honoring choice.
Yes. I love that. So if you had to give advice to someone who kind of finds themselves in a similar position where, they're like, I don't know. I mean, maybe they haven't even admitted it. How does one start to even admit what's true to themselves?
Yeah, I think we have to ask ourselves challenging questions.
Yeah.
Again, like, what truth am I afraid to admit? Why am I afraid to admit that? And that's why I think the journal can be such a powerful place, or a trusted friend or a trusted therapist. But I think it's like, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, shit, there's there is a truth.
Yeah.
I am not wanting to contend with, not wanting to look at, like, that feeling. That's the first feeling. Like, like, I remember when I read Glennon Doyle's Untamed, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Right.
and like, uh-oh, where am I
Yeah.
not being honest with
Uh-oh.
myself? So it's like
Yes.
the first step is kind of, uh-oh.
Yeah,
And then
right.
it's like, okay, now let me stop numbing and distracting and pushing down and running away and, you know, doing whatever I need to do to not see or hear this truth. Okay,
Yeah.
now what is this truth?
Yeah, I want to bring up something that you talked about in the book because I thought it was pretty significant. You just mentioned numbing. One of the things you talked about in the book is you and your husband, I think it was maybe during COVID, you guys got into this routine where, he would cook these amazing meals and you would get the wine pairing. And like at the time you thought we are connecting wonderfully because we're sitting down every night, we're having a meal together, we're drinking wine together. This is such a beautiful connection. But in reality, what you realized was you were both kind of numbing together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We
And
were
I
using food and drink and pleasure to just
Right.
numb, but not actually connect.
Right. And I think that, like, when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about it in that way before. But I think probably a lot of people, when they read that or they hear that, they're going to be like, uh-oh. I mean, it's like people, because couples have all sorts of things that they do that they say are connecting, but it's like, watching a movie or it's like, it's all sorts of stuff that's really not connecting. It's actually like avoidance. And it
Yeah.
kind of
And
sort of
like,
keeps you
and
from
listen, you
connecting.
can watch a movie, you can have a meal and a glass of wine with your partner, and
Yes.
it can be, but like, if you feel disconnected,
Right.
you know, in a consistent way in the relationship, and these are the ways that you connect, I would invite you to consider that maybe you're not actually connecting.
Right.
But like now, my husband and I go have dinner and a glass of wine, and it's like, woo,
Yes, and it is connection. Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's not like if you have a meal and some wine, you're numbing together and not
Yeah,
it can be either or. But I just thought it was interesting. It resonated with me when I read that, because I think we just always assume, okay, if we're sitting next to each other and we're interacting in some way, or we're in the same sort of physical space as each other, that's connecting, when it could not be. Okay, so once somebody sort of is willing to, once they have the and they're like, okay, that maybe there are some truths that I'm avoiding, then what? What do you tell them is next?
Yeah, so there's hearing the truth, and then there's acting on the truth. And I think the acting on the truth is often the harder thing. Hearing the truth, yes, takes courage. Let me be honest with myself. But then it's like, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the question, is what do you want to do about that truth? What do you want to do with that information that you've now known? And for me, once I saw the truth, I could no longer unsee it.
Right.
And so I knew, oh, this is going to suck, but I have to leave this relationship.
Yeah.
And not just because I met someone else and for this other person, because the truth is, I didn't know, even though I was like, I think he's my person, I didn't know if John was a catalyst or the great love of my life.
Right.
But I knew that either way, I wasn't going to go back to my husband.
Right.
And I had to, I had to make that choice for me. And so, it doesn't always have to be the big, huge thing. The truth might be like, oh, I haven't been asking for what I need in this relationship, and this is really important to me, and now I want to speak this need.
Right.
Like that might be what the next step is. Or I've never set boundaries around this, and I need to honor myself by setting a boundary. Or, or I haven't been making space for myself, and that's having me not be able to be present and show up. Whatever that is for you, but it's getting clear on what is the action I'm being invited to, so that I can honor myself.
I'm going to be real with our watchers and listeners. Like, we're recording this on, what's today? August 1st?
August 1st.
Okay. So, because I have to be real for my question to make sense. So, to our watchers and listeners, by the time you guys see this, the book will be out, and please run and buy it, because it's really amazing. It's such a good book. It's well written. It's easy to read, and it is fascinating. And you might, a lot of it may resonate with you. But so that's my question is, my question wants to be like, does your story resonate with a lot of other women? Or like, is the story out there yet to where you've had a response of a lot of other women, maybe men too, saying like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like, I see myself in that story. Or is the story not out enough yet?
No, it's out enough on my Instagram that I'm getting thousands of messages and hate mail.
Yes, I'm sure.
And I mean, women pouring out. I expected women to feel like they were at a crossroads of like, I don't want to be in this anymore, but I'm afraid to make that choice. Yeah. I didn't expect so many women to be like, I actually met my person while married, which was, and men too, though, are reaching out being like, I'm in a sexless marriage and I don't know what to do about it. So I think there's a lot of people are unfulfilled, as you know, as a divorce attorney. Yes. People are unfulfilled. They don't feel met. And there isn't anyone really, or not many people, I guess, out there being like, you can go.
Right. Yeah.
And so some women, I've gotten messages of like, I've been in a marriage for 18 years. We've been intimate 4 times.
Oh my gosh.
And I feel guilty wanting more. Some women have actually just left the unfulfilling relationship. They're being shamed by people close to them. Yeah. Some want to leave but haven't yet and haven't had the courage. But the amount of messages I'm getting, and which is like, for me, I wrote this book because I had to. It was a story that I lived, and I just felt like I had to tell it. Right. But I sit in a room and I bleed on the page, and I hope it will resonate. And so, the way that women are saying how much they need this story, and men, has been really humbling, and I feel really grateful that it's striking a chord at the right time.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's like, I want to liberate, it's like, let's liberate ourselves from these cages that we found ourselves in, that we sometimes have made ourselves.
Totally. Yes. So that would have been my prediction, is like, if the story was out in any capacity at all, that I would have predicted you would have gotten bombarded with other people going, oh my gosh, like that's my story too. I mean, but although the surprising part is like, I met my person. I wasn't expecting that, although I guess it makes sense. But just so many unfulfilling relationships. I can definitely see that this story and the messaging will resonate so much. But for our last little discussion point, you know, generally for most of us, like a marriage or a romantic relationship, that's the biggest, you know, one of the biggest, most significant things in our life. But generally how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so you talk about this story in the book of you getting a massage. And the massage wasn't like what you needed. You know, the way the masseuse was doing it was not what you needed or wanted at the time. But you were scared to speak up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. She was like talking the entire time. She didn't have a firm
That's
touch.
right. Yeah.
And I was lying there like, tell her you want her to push harder. Tell her that you want her to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And I like didn't. And I remember going to my therapist and being like, what is up with this? And she was like, so her comfort is more important than your enjoyment.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, ooh, because, you know, how often do we not say what we need because we don't want to upset the other person?
Yeah, you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to, this is my last question, I promise. When it comes to like those little things, I mean, I think I've told this story before, but you know, a driver will drive me to the airport and I'm like freezing in the car. And I won't say, can you please adjust the temperature? Because again, apparently their comfort is like, I value their comfort or whatever above my own. So how do we start even with the little things to just be like, no, like I'm uncomfortable right now for whatever reason, like please change the environment in some way.
Yeah. So we need to switch from I'm uncomfortable sitting in this thing. So like I'm uncomfortable with the cold temperature of the car.
Mm-hmm.
We need to learn to be comfortable with the driver potentially being annoyed.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what's happening is that like, this is the whole idea of like disappointing others is a skill. Instead of tolerating disconnection, unfulfillment, bad behavior, not being met in a relationship, we tolerate the opposite, which is I'm going to do what's right for me. I'm going to leave this marriage.
Yeah.
And instead, I'm going to tolerate you potentially being disappointed, hurt, or, you know, not approving of my choices.
Right.
And so it's like, how do we do what's authentically right and true for us? And we have to learn to sit with the discomfort of how other people feel about that.
Mm.
And so the practice is doing the thing that's right for you. And then when people have feelings about it, like, you know, and so many of us, we're so conditioned, we're guilted, you know, to try to, I don't know, it's like, you know, moms can guilt us into meeting their needs or, you know, whatever has showed up for us. But essentially, we have to just learn to sit with that discomfort instead of trying to over-explain ourselves, defend ourselves, numb ourselves, run away from the feeling. Right. Do what's right for you. Ooh, this feels uncomfortable because someone is upset or this hurt someone's feelings, even though, you know, it's what's right for me. Sit with that discomfort. That is what we need to learn to tolerate, our own discomfort.
Our own discomfort. Wow.
Our own discomfort of acting authentically, not our own discomfort of sitting in a freezing car.
Right. Okay. I love it.
It's like swapping which comfort or discomfort we're tolerating, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like I should tell the masseuse, hey, can we talk after? I find it really distracting.
Right.
And do you mind going a little bit harder? And if she's like, okay, that's, you know, and then also people shouldn't behave that way. So we should hopefully live in a world where, like, especially if you're paying for a service,
right?
Where like, hey, this is what will really feel good for me is something that people like want to honor and meet.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I love that. That's so true. Amber, thank you so much for telling your story and having the courage to live the story. And thank you for being on the show today.
So fun. Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. We need people to help us with divorce.
That's true. I mean, we're liberating all these people to leave. You know, somebody's got to help them do it. I've got just a little bit more to say. I have business coaches that have always talked about how getting a divorce takes a lot of courage. And I never really used to think about it like that. Even as a divorce lawyer myself, I didn't really think about it like that until that perspective was presented to me. And once you start thinking about it and you talk to people who have gone down that road, you realize you have to be incredibly brave and incredibly courageous. And I always think about that with my clients, about how brave they're actually being. But, there's also a lot of people, and probably all of us to some extent in our lives, have things that we are not pursuing or action that we are not taking because we don't have the courage to do it. And we don't have the willingness to sit in the discomfort of what it is to be our authentic self or to state an authentic need. And so I am talking to you guys as much as I'm talking to myself right now, where I would just challenge all of us. Start with the littlest thing. I mean, the next time that I'm driven by a driver and I'm cold or hot in the car, I'm going to challenge myself to be authentic and to say, can you please adjust the temperature? And I would challenge you to do the same thing, even if it's starting on something so small. Just be brave and be your authentic self, because you were made for more. A prenuptial agreement, or sometimes called a premarital agreement, is an agreement that two parties enter into before they get married that basically chooses to deviate from state law. It assigns rights and responsibilities regarding assets and debts that are acquired during the marriage. Some common misconceptions about prenups are, one, that they basically doom the marriage to failure, or that it's really planning to divorce, and neither of those things are true. But the real value of a prenup is talking about and creating rules around how the things that you acquire during the marriage are going to be characterized. A prenup can protect things like art collections, real estate portfolios, businesses, all those types of assets. The ideal timeline to get a prenup is not 2 weeks before the wedding. The final version of a prenup has to be presented to the parties 7 days before they actually sign it. So there's like a 7-day waiting period. As soon as you get engaged, you should seek a lawyer's advice and counsel on a prenup and start the process then, because the closer the prenup is signed to the wedding, the more likely that the court is going to think there was some sort of duress involved in that person signing it, and they have to prove that the prenup was signed voluntarily in order for them to be enforced. At More Family Law Group, we represent a lot of high-profile people, celebrities, professional athletes, business tycoons. If you already have a lot of assets, or you think you're going to be acquiring a lot of assets during your marriage, we are the best ones to protect that for you and help you make your marriage stronger. Call More Family Law Group today.